Welcome to Thinking Green. I'm Rana, and I'm joined today by Jean Jordan, who is the president of the New London chapter of the NAACP, and Aileen Novick, who is the project manager for the Hempstead houses, which are owned by Connecticut Landmarks. So it might seem like a little bit of an unusual juxtaposition, but this Saturday there will be several events related to Juneteenth. And Connecticut Landmarks and NAACP are the two organizations that are kind of at the forefront of New London planning. So that'll be a large part of what we talk about tonight. So thanks for coming on and welcome.
Thank you.
I guess maybe we can just start talking about Juneteenth and maybe even go back to the history of why we commemorate it and what people can expect to be able to do in New London this weekend.
Okay, Juneteenth is the day in Texas in which the slaves found out they were actually emancipated. It was 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation that they found out. There's been various different reasons given why. One story goes that the person who was sent to tell them never made it to Texas. Another story says that the person made it to Texas, told the officials in charge, and they decided not to tell anyone so they can get a couple more years of crops out, so for economic reasons. But it's a holiday in Texas, and it is recognized in, I think, 48 states in the United States, and they're looking to make it an official holiday.
Is it recognized in Texas?
It is recognized in Texas.
It seems like that's sort of
It
maybe
is
the source of
recognized
the
in Texas.
slowdown way back when.
Yeah, no, it is recognized in Texas because it was a big deal. I mean, can you imagine 2 years after being freed that you finally really truly find out that, you know, you have this freedom so you can leave and do whatever you want?
Yeah, and on the other hand, it's really must be infuriating to know that you really should have been freed 2 years earlier.
I always wondered what they were thinking that day when they were finally told in Galveston that you're free. What were they thinking? Why 2 years later?
Yeah, and it does kind of make a person appreciate. I know social media has its ups and its downsides, but that kind of thing would not happen today.
I think it was the slowest Pony Express they ever had.
Ever, yes.
Ever had, 2 years.
Well, I'm not surprised, but I'm sure going through a lot of that territory, there were a lot of people who did not want to get the word out. It was not to their benefit.
And I always wondered, did they tell people on the way, or did they just hold it in until they got to Texas to tell the governor, to tell the military, if there were other people who knew? But obviously not, because 2 years later, after the Emancipation Proclamation, they finally found the news.
Well, and it shows the slow move, too, because it was really when the Union soldiers finally get that far to Galveston, and that did take them a while as well.
That's true. Transportation has changed tremendously. So, so what is happening in New London this year? It sounds like a lot.
Well, this is, our third year?
Yep.
So we have our two sites. OIC is our other partner, and the Hempstead houses. And we have, on the OIC side of the street, we have food and we have vendors. We have really good food, and I mean, really, really good food. So if you come out for anything, you come out for the food, please. And
Okay, what kind of really good food now, Mike?
Well, for the kids, we do have the hot dogs and, the food that the kids like. But we also have, last year we had a lot of curry chicken.
Wow.
Yeah, really, it was. We joke
Smells
about it
really
because you smell the whole neighborhood. You smell the food, so it kind of draws people in. And then on the Hempstead House side of the street, we have the social service agencies, and we have entertainment.
So what kind of entertainment do you have lined up this year?
We'll have the Professor in Shades of Joy, which is Dwight Baldwin, and his band will be playing. We have Tammy Denise, who portrays different African-American women that are obscure in history, is going to portray Joan Jackson. And right before she goes, we'll have Allegra de Bonaventura, who wrote a book about Adam Jackson, who was enslaved at our site. And it's about Joshua Hempstead, colonial New England, and she's going to speak about her book. And then we'll have Tammy kind of bring some of that history to life through Joan Jackson. We have Adjoa Bandele Asante from New London, who will portray Harriet Tubman. We have the Nathan Hale
A cappella choir.
Coming. Some Hempstead youth are going to do a stirring rendition of the Gettysburg Address. Trying to think what else.
We'll have a table with books for children and a little area for them to sit and do some activities. I think there will also be some children's activities on the OIC side of the street also.
And Expressiones comes, and they usually have put together something that can be a community art project so that everyone who comes can participate. We still have a big banner that they made 2 years ago. Last year they worked on little individual pieces that could be combined. And we do have, like, Fresh New London will be there. A lot of just nonprofits from New London have tables so that they can share information about what they're doing.
Sounds like a lot of fun. And that neighborhood, that kind of has a history with the New London African American community,
It
correct?
is, I call it the first neighborhood. It is where the majority of African Americans in New London did settle. Many of the houses were built for, and so too, the African American community.
Yeah, you find the civilian Haley homes are still labeled there. He was an abolitionist who built homes for
And
free
those are the
blacks.
ones, the small ones all
Small
along
ones at the top of the
Hempstead
street,
Street.
yeah.
And there's 4 still left. And it was put on the National Register in, I think, 1986
Yes.
because it is such a historic district in New London.
One house has changed a little bit, but that's all right. We still know it's
Yeah.
there. It's not
It's
torn
got
down,
a little
still
bit
there.
of a balcony or something.
They built the
Yes.
second floor.
Yeah. I remember maybe 10 years ago when the owner did a little bit, but you can still
But
really
you
tell.
still see the bones of the house.
Yeah, we just did a walking tour this past weekend actually to sort of kick off the events for Juneteenth because it was Trails Day, and we were showing people that historic African American neighborhood because there's a lot that you can still see and a lot of people that don't know the history of that whole area.
We have our Lancaster family who lives in one of the historic houses. It's a Dutch colonial, and that house, if I remember as a child, was moved from one spot on Hempstead Street to another spot.
Oh, wow. Well, that's kind of the story of New London, isn't
We
it?
move houses around.
We move houses.
But it's still on Hempstead Street, so it's still in the neighborhood.
Wow, but it moved, what, farther up on Hempstead? Or?
It was down lower on Hempstead, and they moved it up.
Wow. Now, I wanted to talk about both of your organizations in addition, to the Juneteenth
Which is all free. I don't
activities.
think we
Right,
mentioned
it is-
everything.
We
with
had not
Juneteenth.
talked
And
about
it's 2
that.
days. We are ended on Sunday with the church service outside at the Hempstead houses. I mean, if you're talking African American culture, you have to have the church in there. So on
Right.
Sunday this year, we're going to end with church services done by In His Presence Ministries. Reverend Joyce and Reverend Herman Pollard will be doing the service Sunday morning at 11:30 a.m.
And what time are the activities going to be going on Saturday?
Noon to 4.
So everyone, come on out there.
Yes.
Now you mentioned that it's free, but it isn't the only place that's free. I wanted to talk a little bit about Connecticut landmarks, and it's open house day all around the state, correct?
Yes.
So I do have a slide, well, it's up there, about the Hempstead houses, but also there are so many other properties that people can go to visit. And I have one more. This is now I have no idea where all these houses are. Maybe I don't know if you do.
I do.
Okay, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the ones in other towns.
Sure, we have 9 historic homes that we operate throughout the state. So we're the largest network of heritage sites from Connecticut house museums in the state. And what we do is we try and bring the past to life through these places. So our headquarters is in Hartford. So you see the Amos Bowl House is the top left there. That's our new office space, and that's the oldest brick house left in Hartford. And
Now,
it's
how
been-
old is that?
that
Did
one
you
I'm not
say?
sure the date. That's we just turned it into our headquarters that opened about
It's a
2
beautiful
years ago
house.
now. And then the one to the far right on that same row is the Butler McCook House, which is a 19th century house in Hartford, which really brings to life the old Main Street of Hartford. So people go there, they learn about the McCook family, who was a wealthy family. They traveled the world. You can see all the objects they collected, learn about them. This weekend we'll also be busy in our Bethlehem site where we have the Bellamy Faraday House. And that house has been around since the Great Awakening days of the colonial time, but it also was a philanthropist home. Caroline Faraday lived out there, and she was really influential in bringing women from the Ravensbrück concentration camps to the States for recovery, for just a new
Wow.
place to live. And there's been a new novel written about that, The Lilac Girls. And so this weekend, the author of that book, Martha Hall Kelly, will be there talking about that. So a lot of the events there are sold out. You'd want to call ahead because a lot of people are interested in this book. It's received a lot of attention. So that'll be going on as well. Today is Nathan Hale's birthday, and so out in Coventry, we have the Nathan Hale site that will be free and open. And on Sunday, they're having a ribbon cutting because they just restored one of the old barns there that people can go see.
Wow.
That can be used for education. We also have Isham Terry House, which is in Hartford. That one is not open all the time. That one really shows you the benefits of preservation. It's like the only thing left in its neighborhood from that time. And then we have Phelps Hathaway House out in Suffield, Mass.
Oh, it's
Suffield,
almost
Connecticut.
Mass,
That's right on the
actually.
border there. And so they have an interesting story of sort of people who inheriting great wealth to going bankrupt from colonial and early times to the Revolution. And they have a beautiful garden too. If you're interested in gardens, you'd want to hit the Suffield House and Bethlehem, and even our Hartford House has a beautiful garden.
Now, is the Hempstead House, are those among the oldest of the houses you have?
Yes, I think the Hempstead House and the Butoff Williams, which is out in Wethersfield. The Hempstead House is the frame house is the oldest house left in New London. That's a 1678 house, we believe. So that one is very old.
It's amazing that it survived.
Yes. Yeah, the family owned it till 1937. So it really, and then it went right to Connecticut Landmarks. So it was good that they left it.
Wow, that is kind of exciting. And people, there's free admission to all of these houses on Saturday,
Yes.
correct?
Yep, that's right.
So,
And many other sites throughout the state, sponsored by the Connecticut Office of Tourism. So definitely check out their website to see everything you can get to for free this weekend.
so this could be a really great weekend to be traveling around Connecticut if you're in,
Yes.
especially if you're interested in preservation. Now, has Connecticut Landmarks, it seems as though the past few years, the approach has been to really use the preserved buildings as a way for people to understand the history of the region. Has that always been the mission of Connecticut Landmarks, to use the buildings as the connection to our past?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're having more of a input on the stories that these places can tell. We've just joined as an organization the International Sites of Conscience, because like the Hempstead houses, which has a connection to Northern slavery, a lot of these houses have sort of complicated histories. And so we're really working on ways to get visitors involved, to make them want to visit. A lot of people we find sometimes think that they're going to be stuck on a horrible tour for an hour. So we're trying to make more of a dialogue with people to show them the relevance of these sites to current history and to topics going on. So that is definitely something that we're working on.
I know that I say this all the time, but the history of this area is so phenomenal, and those of us who have lived on the East Coast our whole lives do not have much of an appreciation of it compared to people who come from other places. And my in-laws live in Oregon, and they think that anything older than 1900 is like an antique. And those of us who live in New London are just not that impressed by like 1890s vintage buildings. But, if you don't live right in this area that was, among the first settled in, by Europeans, you really don't have an idea of how valuable what we have is.
Yeah, and we do get a lot of people who want to see, the framework inside. They really want to see how it was constructed, for people that either have an old house and are trying to restore it, or they're just really interested in the old construction styles.
But not only that, I think the Hempstead houses are preserving our history. They are telling the story of Adam Jackson, a story that hasn't been told. Many people don't know about it. And when I talk about it, people like, there was a slave? They had a slave who lived in New London? I said, yes, there are many slaves. So if we didn't have the Hempstead houses, Connecticut Landmarks, that part of our history would be gone.
Now, since you're on TV now, tell us a little bit about that story, because I've heard that it's...
Well, Aileen knows it better than I do.
Yeah,
so
so
tag team.
there was the Jackson family. We have a lot of information about them. When Adam Jackson, who's enslaved at the Hempstead houses, he comes to the Hempstead houses in 1727. He's about 27 years old. And on his mother's side, his family is already 3 generations of enslaved people in New London. So it really shows the history of how long slavery went on in New London. And there's sort of always misinformation about slavery in the North. Some people feel that it was better here, families maybe weren't broken up. And Adam Jackson's story really disproves that theory. His mother is a slave woman when he's born. She has 2 children, and then she is given the opportunity to be free by their master, Mr. Fox. And so, but to become free, she has to leave her children, 3 and 1, behind with the Fox family. And so, we do think she goes back to see them, but obviously that's very young. And so it just shows, when he goes to the Hempstead houses, Joshua Hempstead was a justice of the peace. We know he could write very well. He kept a diary for 50 years, which is some of the information we have about these people. But, he purchases Adam Jackson, and then Adam comes. But we see all this information about his family, because his mother, though she's freed, is part of a family struggle over property. And because she's part of that, she was considered property when she was a slave woman, they fight over her. They put her back into slavery. Her husband was a free man, and he works with John Rogers, who was a Rogerine in New London, caused a lot of commotion for his religious ideas. But they go, they sail across Long Island, they take her and the children from where they've been re-enslaved. There are documents that John Jackson, puts a mark on because he's given affidavits because if people want to know how did she leave this house, they think that it's him and John Rogers. John Jackson goes to court for her in the Massachusetts colonial system and gets her freedom. And so it's really this long saga, and because of all the documents, it really does collect a lot of information about that one family in New London.
And I'm guessing that they're not the only family that had a lot of family drama around slavery.
Right, and that's the thing. There's so much that people usually don't know because, we don't have much from Adam Jackson's. We have really what Joshua Hempstead wrote about him, which is quite a lot, but it's all his work. But then you find that we do have more information because of these court records. And so that's what a lot of families don't have, as a way to find all of this information.
Well, I didn't even have any idea of the Rogerine connection, but that's kind of interesting to me because although my husband Bob is from Oregon, he does trace back to some Rogerines in one branch of the family. They went from, this area to the free state of Texas, and then some of them ended up in Oregon, some in Louisiana. So it's really interesting that the Rogerines had dealings with probably abolitionist kind of activities. So if we fast forward to today, and maybe we can talk a little bit about the history of the NAACP and why it was started and what its relevance is in today's world.
Well, the NAACP goes back to the Niagara movement, and did you know the Niagara movement?
I don't. Okay. And I'm sure the viewers don't either. So
Okay. The Niagara movement was an abolitionist movement. During that time period, there were a lot of lynchings going on across the country, Illinois, upstate New York, and the Niagara movement was started. I'm going blank on some of the names, but as we know, W.E.B. Du Bois was a member of the Niagara movement, and from there, they went from the Niagara movement and started the NAACP. NAACP is the oldest and largest civil rights organization in the world.
now, how many years has it existed continuously?
We are 104 years old. 104, I want to say. I'm off by a few years probably, but it's like 104 years. Forgive me. When you hit 100, what difference does it make at that point? You're a centennial organization. So it's the oldest, largest civil rights organization in the world. It's contrary to what people believe. They say, oh, it's just for black people. No, it's for all people who feel their civil rights have been violated or who feel the need to work to help to make sure that everyone's civil rights are intact. And that's even more important nowadays than it has been in the past, per se, because I think we're starting to see a little bit of past repeating itself.
We are, and it's really interesting, when thinking about topics for this TV show. After the election, there were a lot of people that suddenly felt much more threatened than they had, at least for the last decade or so. And I think that has continued, and there's a lot of fear out there.
Well, we have to be careful because a lot of rights are starting to be rolled back, and you think that just affects one group of people when in fact it's going to affect everyone at some point. You can't roll something back and think this is going to be good for everyone. It's not. We know that. We've seen it happen in the past. So we just have to, keep steadfast and immovable and just keep moving forward, which is our theme this year, steadfast and immovable.
Okay, well, before I talk about some of the other issues, maybe you can talk a little bit about the Freedom Fund dinner that's coming up.
Well, this year we have our Freedom Fund on June 29th, Thursday night at 6 p.m. And we have a great guest speaker. Her name is Gwen Carr. Gwen is the mother of Eric Garner. Eric Garner is the young man who was killed by the police in Staten Island. He was the young man who was held in the chokehold and was yelling, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe." Mrs. Carr has started a movement along with the mothers of other young men who have been killed due to, how can I say that? I don't want to come out. Well, due to interactions with the police. So she is one of the leaders of that movement. She will be here to speak about her struggles, what she has gone through, what she sees, what she feels that we need to do to help keep this movement moving forward.
Now, you also honor people every year.
This year we are honoring Nikisha Grant, the executive director of OIC. I think Nikisha, over the years, as we know, OIC kind of got away from a little bit of what they were doing, and I think now they are back to what Benny Jennings, the original executive director, what his thoughts were for OIC. They're doing so many great things. They have classes. They're doing construction trades. They are doing the CNA. They've just been a really good part of the New London community, and I don't think people really realize how much work that they do, and they need to be recognized. We also recognize the Reverend Carolyn Paterno of All Souls Unitarian Church. She and the All Souls community have again been on the forefront of keeping Black Lives Matter in the forefront here in southeastern Connecticut. They have been just wonderful in all the work that they have done. We also have Sheriff Waldron Phillips, who has been a sheriff for many years at the courthouse and also a former president of the NAACP, and Reverend Montgomery, Harold Montgomery, who's also being received. Waldron Phillips and Harold Montgomery are receiving Lifetime Achievement Awards. And we are also recognizing the New London girls basketball coach, Holly Misto, and the basketball team.
Yeah, they were fantastic.
Yes, they were.
So if people want to go to this dinner, how do they sign up?
They can call us at 860-439-1423. Tickets are $65 per person. Tables are $550 for a group of 10. We do have ads, but if you call 860-439-1423, we can get the information out to you.
Okay, well, thank you about that, on that. So what I want, you touched on, especially when you were talking about Eric Garner's mom and the work she's been doing, that there are still a lot of inequities in our system. And you had given me a couple of slides about an event that's happening in Hartford soon.
Right. On June 14th, we are having a rally for the march in support of the formerly incarcerated. As you know, Connecticut has been on the forefront of prison reform and second chance legislation. So we, and the NAACP state conference has been a big part of that. So on the 14th, we are having a rally to talk about what happens when you come out. There are not enough programs set in place to help these young men and these young women who come out of prison. So, and with budget cuts, Even more so.
Yeah.
So on March 14th, there will be a rally in Hartford, a march to the rally site on this topic.
And you said Connecticut's on the forefront, and I believe it because I think they had banned the box legislation a few years ago, and the formerly incarcerated do get reenfranchised to vote. But we still see numbers like when we see statistics of who's getting jailed and who isn't getting jailed, and our incarceration rate still seems kind of high to me.
I think in Connecticut, we are lowering it more so than other states. I know people say, oh, well, they're emptying out the prison. Those people belong in prison. One of the reasons why the prisons are so crowded are because of the drug laws. And we know that if you're a user, that's not necessarily a crime.
Right.
That can be considered an illness. And do you put sick people in prisons, or do you help sick people?
And what is really the most efficient way to deal with it? Not even talking about the moral side, but like if we want to, have good results.
Exactly.
It happens to be a topic that I've been interested in for years, partly because the years I worked for Head Start, quite a few of the students had incarcerated parents, and most of the parents had not committed violent crimes. And the effect that it had on the lives of these preschoolers to be separated from their parents, not always have proper social services in place for those kids, especially if neither parent was accessible to them, was just really heartbreaking. So it became an area that I was interested in. And I looked at what Portugal has done in terms of decriminalizing use of drugs, and their crime has gone down, their incarceration has gone down, and their use rate has gone down. So we do have some work to do.
And that's what it's all about, is making sure these families, these children that you've talked about, do have parents around. If you have someone who's going to prison for 5 years for having, a little baggie of marijuana, what sense does that make when they could be out here working and contributing to society?
Right. So there's another piece to this. It's the same event, the March for Justice, and it says jobs, housing, pardons,
and
youth at risk.
Those are all the issues that come about when you want to have people come out and to become good citizens back into the community. Where are the jobs for them? What's the housing looking like? Some people, as we stated, if you're in prison for 5 years for having a little bag of marijuana, doesn't make any sense, but now you have a record. Let's talk about pardons. There's youth at risk.
Yeah.
If we don't have these parents around, we have those youth that can be considered homeless, who are going from place to place. We have young men who are coming out of prison, still young. I could consider them still youth if you're like 19, 20, 21 years old. Foster care. These are all issues that line up with the second chance.
So this is June 14th.
This is June 14th.
Now,
Starts
who's
at 5 p.m.
sponsoring this?
The Connecticut State NAACP is the main sponsor. They've been working on this for a few months now, and it's one of their big initiatives. As I said, Connecticut is in the forefront on this topic, and one of the reasons is because of the State of Connecticut NAACP. A few years ago at our Pennsylvania convention, we had President Obama, we had former President Bill Clinton, we had Governor Malloy, and they all came, and one of the things they talked about was second chance bills. When they left the convention, President Obama, Governor Malloy, they were going to visit prisons to talk to the men who were in prison on these drug charges, talk about how their life has been impacted, how their families have been impacted. So as I said, it is a big initiative here in Connecticut, and it is going across the country.
Now, is there anything else on like a legislative agenda in Connecticut that people should be keeping their eyes open for?
Well, I know they were just, yesterday, they were looking at the, I just went
I don't
blank.
remember. I know Gary Winfield had something
It
on
was
his
the,
Facebook page.
The body cams.
Oh.
They were doing legislation on that, and it did not go through, so I think they're still working on getting that passed.
And I would think body cams would be something that would be wanted all around.
I think so. Some people don't, but my point of view is that I think it would be safer for both the police and the community to have body cams, because no one could be accused of anything, and if you are, you have the evidence right then and there. But not everyone feels the same way that I do.
And there does seem to be some pushback.
There's also an issue of cost. As we know, in this state, in our community, we have budget issues, so how much does it cost?
And cost is always going to come into it, but, you know, I think about, you know, the legalization of recreational marijuana, regulation and
Right.
legalization. And, you know, if you look at states like Colorado or Oregon or Washington State, it's actually raising their revenue and not costing them.
And I think I read where their crime rate has not actually gone up.
And I think the opioid use has gone
Gone
down,
down.
which has really been a huge issue in Connecticut recently. That you know, opioid use, but also deaths is kind of, you know, become quite frightening.
I've read about communities in other parts of the country that are so totally different than New London, but you see the same thing going on. And it's not a New London problem. New London just happens to have the hospital, but it's a
Right.
southeastern Connecticut problem.
I think that's true of a lot of things, actually, that there are problems that are much more regional, but because New London has the social services that we see it much closer up look at it than people who live in outlying areas. But that doesn't mean that people who are coming to New London for the services, that their problems originated in New London. They
Right.
didn't.
Right.
Well, let's see. I wanted to. Oh, one other thing I wanted to talk about before we go back to the historic part with the NAACP is the youth group, because if you go to the website, the youth group gets a lot of, you know, coverage, and also I know that, you know, you kind of grew up in the NAACP. I worked with your mom back in the 80s, and she was always very active, and I imagine almost from your toddler years, you were immersed in it.
I wasn't in a youth group per se, but I was an NAACP child, you could say. My cousin Linwood Bland was the NAACP president in New London during the Civil Rights era. My great uncle Luke Harris was the first vice president of the NAACP when it was formed. So we have a family history. It's like if you're in a fraternity or sorority, you automatically get into that fraternity and sorority. I think it's the same thing with the NAACP. You're automatically in it because you grew up with it. So it's, you know, it's been here for a long time. It's been a needed part of the community. It has made differences in our community. And I think I see from the people I talk with, we get a lot of respect. I know sometimes something happens and you read those little comments in the blogs and
Oh, you shouldn't read those
I know.
comments.
My mother always told me, never read the newspaper
Don't
before
read
you
the
leave the house in the morning.
comments.
We just ignore them because I don't think they fully know what we do. I think people expect to see us out in their faces all the time. A lot of what we do is behind the scenes. You don't even know about it. You don't hear about it. But we help people take care of problems when they feel their rights have been violated. But it's not something that's going to be splashed on the paper.
Now, if there is a young person, a teen, and they decide they want to get involved, what kind of thing, what do they have to do? How do they start?
Well, they can call us. We can set them up with the youth advisor and the youth group. The youth program runs exactly the same as the adult branch. They are their own branch. They separate from the adults. We can't tell them what to do, even though sometimes I think we would like to, but we can't. They have a president, a vice president, so we would set them up with them, and they have monthly meetings, sometimes once a month, sometimes twice a month, and they have issues that they look into. They go to trainings. They learn how to be civil rights advocates. They learn how to speak for themselves. We have them come to city council meetings. They go to Board of Education meetings. They just to train the next generation of those people who are going to be our city councilors, our Board of Education members, our next president possibly.
Sure. So what age range does that cover?
Anyone can become a member. You can get a newborn a membership.
Oh,
But
they won't participate much for a
we
little
found
while.
for participation, it's mainly upper elementary school, middle school, and high school. The last 10 years or so, I think we've had mainly more middle school, high school, and college students. You can become a youth member until you're 25.
Oh, so really, the people who start when they're in middle school or high school can stay on and kind of be mentors
Yes.
for a few years,
Yes.
at least through their college years.
We've had 98% of our students who are with us for at least 4 years graduate from college.
Wow. Now, other than the monthly meetings, what kind of things do they do?
Well, they do social stuff on the side, but they do a lot of training. People think it's a social organization. It is not. They're learning. It's an education organization. So they go to trainings. They go to monthly meetings around the state. They meet with other youth. During the summertime when we have our national convention, we bring youth with us. Last year we had 2 youth members go to Cincinnati with us. This summer we will be going to Baltimore. We will have a few going with us. The year of the Trayvon Martin verdict, we had a youth in Florida at the convention during that weekend when the verdict came out, and we weren't with them. We had our former president, Don Wilson, had our youth, and the first thing we thought is, oh my God, we have our babies down there. We don't know what's going to happen because it's an explosive time. But the youth came back and they told us that, they sat, they had conversations, they talked about marching, they decided about safety issues, and they really learned a lot.
And I do have one slide just on the vision and objectives and issues for the youth group, because I thought it was interesting that it is a lot of like political training and real activism on issues.
Well, not so much political, but activism.
Yeah, not partisan, but
Activism.
but yeah, community activism. So yeah, it seems as though it's a real way that some
But
of
it's
the
not
young
just
people
with
can.
members of our youth group. The Hempstead House's Connecticut Landmarks and NAACP also worked on a grant, which Aileen was a big part of, with Benny Dover Jackson Middle School,
tell me.
Leadership, Language, and Culture. The grant, the
Yeah, we were
Graustein.
trying to, it was an equity and education grant. The Graustein Foundation located in Hamden, Connecticut is really interested in studying this. And because we have activists at Hempstead eventually that become abolitionists,
Sure.
we're really interested in looking at, how do we promote activism with the youth today? Because really that's how we're going to get equity, is if we can get all of these kids to address some of the issues. So we went in and sort of brought in speakers who could talk about activism and history. We had Kevin Johnson from the State Library, who portrays an African-American Civil War soldier from Connecticut. We had Tammy Denise, who portrays a woman aboard the Amistad. We had some local Mashantucket Pequot who'd been out at Standing Rock this summer. So just people that could come in and talk about sort of activism through history. We partnered with NAACP, Connecticut College, who provided mentors for the classroom. And these 8th graders really had to think of an issue they were passionate about and create an exhibit about it. And not just say, about it, but to say what steps they could personally take to make an action for that. And then they presented their projects at Connecticut College. We had kids from Clark Lane and Waterford come to see the projects. Curtis Goodwin from the talent show was the guest speaker to speak to all the kids about activism in their communities. Because that really is a big part of a lot of those issues that NAACP is addressing. That a lot of people are trying to address is how do we get the youth to see what action they can take.
The projects that they did were beyond belief. I don't think myself as an 8th grader could have done the job that these students worked. It was phenomenal.
Yeah, we worked with Bailey Howard was their teacher at Benny Dover, and Peter Drudge was their student teacher, and they really got these kids to do this research, and they really had to pick something.
Some of the topics were amazing. They were amazing. And we had the mayor came, the police chief came, the Stephen Fields, who's the chief of staff, they were there. They were just blown away by the work that these youth did.
And they address topics like police brutality, and they have police in the schools, and you would see the police officers stop and talk to them about their projects, and they really did get good at the public speaking. I think that's what they were most nervous about, was presenting their topics. And I think by the end they were like, yes, I am the expert on, because they all picked their topic, and they really felt like, I can do this. I know what I'm talking about here.
And we had one young man who did his project on I Can't Breathe. As soon as I walked into the door, the first thing Aileen said was, Jean, you have to come and see this. And I made it over there, and I looked, and he had his whole board was on Eric Garner and the police brutality and the chokehold. We are working to have him come to our Freedom Fund dinner so that he can meet Gwen Carr, Eric Garner's mother. And this young man said to me, he said, if I can't come, you can take my work and show it to her. I was just blown away that, someone that young had that presence of mind to be able to, do this.
So what is coming up in the future at the Hempstead houses? What kind of activities or programs do you have on into the summer?
Sure. Well, in June, our next event will be a paint night, where if people want to come paint the Joshua Hempstead houses, the Drunken Palette will lead them in a painting night, so that should be fun. Then we have an abolitionist tea on July 22nd, where we'll be sort of focusing on the abolition movement in New London, see what they might have been talking about so people can sit at a tea. We have summer camp too, which will be the first week in August. And we do provide scholarships. If you're from New London, just check out our website. We have free camp for kids that need it, and it's Monday through Friday from 9 to 1. And it's really a fun way. The kids did enjoy it last year to get sort of a hands-on experience. We bring in all sorts of people, a Revolutionary War soldier, different people to portray the past.
Now, do you end up getting a lot of kids who kind of live in the neighborhood now?
That's what we've been trying to do, and we have been successful, with our camp, and we have this youth group, so they've been meeting every Sunday the last few weeks to practice the Gettysburg Address, and so that's what we're really trying to do, is create this community of kids from the neighborhood and from New London who, know about this history and want to preserve it, and we're getting some kids. It's been fun.
Well, it does seem as though that neighborhood is undergoing interesting times right now, that families are moving in.
Definitely.
And the neighbors know each other, and it seems as community is really in a growth period.
It really is a nice neighborhood, yeah. And the kids do all, last night they were all, our next door neighbor hosts a lot of barbecues, Mr. Barrett, and they were all, in his backyard there. They gave me some food as I was leaving, and so it really is a nice community.
I think he's very happy about it, because when they first moved into that house next door, there wasn't as much of a community around them, and it seems as though a lot of families with kids have moved in since then.
Yeah, one of our youth group kids just moved into one of the civilian Haley homes, so there are a lot of people coming in.
And I think we have to give credit to Aileen and the Hempstead houses for that, because remember growing up, the Hempstead house was not necessarily a welcoming place. In fact, there was a time when they didn't want students of a certain age in there. You had to be a certain age in order to go in there, because they felt they were going to damage the property. But it's more open, it's more receptive to the neighborhood. They are telling the history of the neighborhood, and that makes a big difference.
Yeah, and we're really trying to outreach, because we found that some people hadn't felt welcome in the past, and we really want to change that.
Now, have you found that was the case at some of the other locations, of some of the other houses, or was that more specific to Hempstead House, that you're trying for more accessibility?
we're on all our sites, we're definitely trying for more accessibility. I think Hempstead is unique because we really are in this residential urban neighborhood where some of our properties, like the Hale Homestead out in Coventry, it's kind of adjacent to the Hale Woods.
Yeah.
So, we really do have that opportunity to make neighborhood connections that some of our sites don't because of our location.
Yeah, well, it was in the middle of a booming New London neighborhood
Right.
150 years ago.
Right, because sort of right before you hit the Haley homes, you can see where they used to hay for the farm, but
Wow.
now it's, a bustling neighborhood.
Now, I don't want to forget to have each of you tell people how they can support or get involved in your organization. So I don't know which of you wants to go first, but
Well, they can call the New London NAACP at 860-439-1423 or email us at, and this is very long, unit2010@newlondonnaacp.org, all spelled out.
that is really long. But you also have a website.
We have a website which is undergoing renovations because we're having some little glitches with that. But we also have two Facebook pages. We have the adult branch Facebook page and we have the youth Facebook page. So there's all ways to get in touch with us. If you see me walking down the street, just stop and say, hey, how are you? Can I help?
And when are your meetings held?
Our meetings are the second Tuesday of the month. Our general membership meeting is at 6 p.m. at OIC in New London. And OIC is, of course, across the street from the Hempstead House.
That's right.
Yeah, and it's got its own history, although it already was not an elementary school when I moved to New London.
Yes, it was a
For many years.
Salt and Store school named after Gordon Salt and Store, who we have since found. We knew he had ships, but we also now consider him as a slaver.
Right,
Oh.
Anne Farrow's book, The Log Books, that came out maybe 2 years ago now,
Right.
she really tries to address this mysterious log book she found and who the owner might be, and
Right.
she does think it's Salt and Stowe.
Oh, so I wonder if as we get more awareness in New London, that we might be reconsidering some of the people we're memorializing on our buildings. It's happening in some places.
I know, and someone asked me about that, and I felt it is part of the history. You cannot wipe away the history, but instead of trying to move these big, huge monuments, let's put something else next to it so that we have the true story. We could put another plaque there telling the story of this is who this person is and this is the way it really was, instead of having to move. Because you don't want to see history just whitewashed.
What-
You have to know the true facts, and maybe having those statues there as a reminder would be of much more help than in the middle of the night removing them.
I know when you were talking, I was reminded that Edward Snowden was recently interviewed and asked about what he thought about how to combat fake news. And he said, you can't shut it down. You have to combat fake news with more news.
Right.
You just need to get the truth
Truth
to
out.
drown out the fake.
What's the saying? The truth will set you free.
And hopefully it can be louder ultimately than the fake. Okay, we have 3 minutes, so can you talk
Okay.
about how people can learn about
Sure.
Connecticut landmarks?
We have a new updated webpage. If you go to ctlandmarks.org, and you can see all the properties and all the events. If you wanted to get involved at Hempstead, you can just email us, hempstead@ctlandmarks.org. And we hope to have a volunteer sign-up sheet at Juneteenth, so or just stop by. We're open all during the summer till the end of October, Saturdays and Sundays, 1 through 4. We have a lot going on. We're doing a community reading of the Declaration of Independence on Sunday, July 2nd. So we're looking for
That could be
people
fun.
that might want to join us to read. So, there are lots of different ways to get involved.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, both of you, and hopefully you'll have a great crowd on Saturday.
And
Great
sunny
weather,
days.
And
yes.
Sunday.
And sunny days.
Yes.
Well, we can hope for the sunny days. So let the weekends be sunny, at
Yes.
least, because there's so much going on. So thank you so much for coming on. Next week, Eric Carrion, who is the youth director for Fresh New London, is going to come on, and we'll talk about some of what he's been doing around town. So thank you, and we'll see you. I won't see you on Saturday and Sunday, but hopefully a lot of people will.
Thank
you.
So thanks for coming.
Tuimbe Afrika, tuimbe Afrika, tuimbe Afrika, ni mpenda mzuri sana. Tuimbe Afrika, tuimbe Afrika, tuimbe Afrika, ninakupenda sana. Tuimbe Afrika, tuimbe Afrika, tuimbe Afrika, ni mpenda mzuri sana. Tuimbe Afrika, tuimbe Afrika. Oh, tuimbe